welcome to Red Ice Creations Radio. I'm your host, Henrik Palmgren. We are recording from the west coast of Sweden, and we are here with a new program every Thursday and Sunday covering fascinating subjects with interesting guests. Our website is redicecreations.com. Highly recommended that you visit often. Our news section is updated frequently, and we have a lot of links and resources to fascinating material there for you. We also have our free radio archive up there for you with radio programs going back to our start over a year ago. We also have our subscriber section for those of you who want to dive even deeper into the subjects we cover and get the full story, as it were. You'll find all the details on redicecreations.com. Today we have an interesting guest with us on the line. Author and lecturer Gregg Braden is with us, and Gregg is internationally renowned as a pioneer in bridging science and spirituality. And Gregg's work shows beyond any reasonable doubt that we have the power to reverse disease, redefine aging, and even change reality itself by embracing the focused power of human emotion as the quantum language of change. And Gregg Braden is the author to The ICEA Effect, The God Code, and his newest book is The Divine Matrix, Bridging Time, Space, Miracles, and Belief. And by the way, Gregg's website, in case you want to follow along during our talk here today, is greggbraden.com. So head on over there and take a look. And we have a lot to cover here today, and we have a little bit of time here. So let's say hello to our guest. Welcome to Red Ice Creations Radio, Gregg. Thank you for coming on.
Well, Henrik, it's a pleasure to hear your voice. I'm absolutely thrilled to be on your program today, and I want to thank you for the kind words in our introduction and for all the work you're doing in your part of the world to bring this information to your listeners. I want to thank you very much. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and I know that you're on a busy schedule, and I really appreciate you taking the time. There's much to talk about. You know, your books and research cover many areas, and I'd love to talk about your latest book, of course, the Divine Matrix, Bridging Time, Space, Miracles, and Belief. But before we dive into that, maybe we could spend a little bit of time just talking a little bit about your background in this field and kind of what directed you into this area to begin with.
Well, certainly. It's interesting when people see my background. I was trained in the hard sciences. My degrees are in the earth sciences, and I've studied the ocean sciences and computer science, mathematics, physics, biology. And people ask how I made what they consider to be the leap from those kinds of studies into the spirituality that we'll talk about today. And I think when I first heard the question, I was a little surprised because to me it didn't seem like a leap. It always seemed like a logical progression. Even as a child, I never made the separation between science and spirituality. I've always believed that when we study science, when we study the world around us, what we're doing is understanding how that world works and our relationship to that world, and ultimately that leads us to an understanding of our relationship to a greater existence, to a higher power. Mm-hmm. So I always believed that, and I just thought everyone else believed the same. And it wasn't until I was in the corporations that I found nothing could be further from the truth, that people believed you either follow the path of science or you follow the path of spirituality, but somehow the two are mutually exclusive. They are not compatible. So in the last years of the Cold War, during the late 1980s, I found myself working in the defense industry for a company called Martin Marietta Aerospace and Defense. Mm-hmm. Today it's called Lockheed Martin.
Oh wow! Okay.
And it was a frightening time in the history of our world. As I'm sure your listeners remember, the Cold War was one of the most frightening wars in the history of our planet. Mm. Although it didn't have the visibility that Iraq or Vietnam or something like that may have had, the consequences of where the Cold War could have been were absolutely chilling. Because the superpowers were willing to use nuclear weapons as a threat against one another in a way that had never been done before. Mm. And it was during that time I was working in that industry on the one hand, and on the other hand, I've always believed that there is a principle in our past that tells us that we're a family and that tells us that we're more than the differences that lead to the wars. And if we could ever find that principle, Henrik, my feeling was maybe we wouldn't have the kinds of wars we'd had in the past. And that, for me, was a big turning point of marrying the holistic and the spiritual principles with the best science of our time, and looking for a way to apply the combination of those things into something that would help us to avoid the kinds of wars that we've seen in the 20th century, and to recognize that we're a family. So it was a logical progression more than a great awakening, but it was the Cold War and my role in the defense industry during the Cold War that really pointed me to the direction of bringing the spiritual principles into our awareness with a scientific background, so that we can know that they're real. And
interesting.
That's a long answer to a short question.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It lays the foundation for other things that we'll talk about in this hour.
Definitely, and that's fascinating. And considering your background in science and technology, then I mean, we're right now moving at tremendous speed into our technological progress is incredible, and we have I don't know if we should call it a threat or not, but we have kind of the nanobots future coming, uncontrollable singularities to particle accelerators, tapping into other dimensions, and potentially even out of control AI systems coming in. I mean, is this something we should be concerned about? Is this troublesome, or is this simply the signs of a new opportunities opening up for the human race?
Well, I think they're both, and everything that you said is true. All of those things are happening. Personally, I have to begin my answer by saying that I'm an optimistic person. I believe that we're here on purpose. I believe humankind is no accident of biology, no fluke of nature, that we're an intentional species. While we're still understanding where we came from and how we got here, I know that we're no accident. And because of that, I believe that we're here for much more than simply to destroy ourselves. I think there's something much deeper that is happening here. A number of conferences have been held over the last few years, bringing together the best minds of our time with the question, where are we headed right now? And in 2005, the publication Scientific American carried the proceeds of one of those conferences in a special edition. It was called Crossroads Planet Earth. And it identified a number of different scenarios that are happening. Some of them you've just mentioned. It identified a number of scenarios. Any one of these scenarios, if it were to go to completion, would bring an end to our world as we know it, whether we're talking about abrupt climate change or a global virus disease that we have no antidote for, or whether we're talking about the possibility of a third world war. All of these things were being considered. And what the experts said is that we are accelerating to a time that they call the bottleneck in human history, when our resources are stretched, when our ability to solve the problems using old ways of thinking are stretched to the maximum. And what all of these scientists said, Henrik, and this is what's so exciting, they all said that there's a beautiful future for humanity on the horizon, that there's a time where we've outgrown the habit of war, for example, that we've outgrown our susceptibility to disease and natural disasters. All of those things are on the horizon. But what they said is that we must find a way to get through the next 8 to 10 years before we have that beautiful future. That we've got to find a way to solve the problems of energy, of war, based on our belief systems, the diseases, the climate changes that we're looking at now. And this is what brings us right back into this conversation that you and I are having today, because they said to solve these problems, we've got to look at them through new eyes. We've got to look at them in a way that we've never looked at them before, because the tools that we've always used to solve our problems in the past simply are not working. So we need new tools based on new understandings that come from a new way of looking at our world. And for me, this is why our newest book, The Divine Matrix, it's such a powerful book, because it's taking an old idea, the idea that everything is connected. That's a very ancient idea. But it's taking that idea through the eyes of what modern science now has discovered, some of the discoveries only within the last couple of years, and it's bringing that information to the general public in a way that everyone can understand and in a way that everyone can use, and it means that everyone has a voice. We have a vote in how we solve these problems. It's not left to just a handful of leaders in a couple of nations. And I think that's what makes this time so exciting, and that's why I am so optimistic about this time.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds very good. I mean, let's kind of go to the heart of the matter, I guess. I mean, the Divine Matrix. What is that? Tell us about it.
Well, the Divine Matrix. It was very healing for me to write this book. It's the result of over 22 years of research and my presentations that I've shared with audiences all over the world. And it, it's based in the scientific fact. And it is now a fact that there is a field of energy that bathes all of the universe, as far as scientists know, that permeates all of creation, a field of energy that connects everything in ways now that we're only beginning to understand. And it's so interesting to me, because modern science is only now arriving at this understanding, on the one hand, and on the other hand, this is the place where the ancient spiritual traditions, some of them 5, 6, 7, 8,000 years old, this is the place where they begin. So people ask me, they say, well, Gregg, why would you spend your time going into the ancient temples and spending so much time in the remote monasteries in Tibet and Egypt and Bolivia and Peru? And this is the answer to that question, because there's a knowledge that's held in those ancient cultures that we in the Western traditions lost around 300 years ago with the birth of science. So from my perspective as a scientist, I'm thinking that if we're facing these great challenges, and the way that we look at the world doesn't give us the tools to solve them, what would happen if we take the best science that we have today and we marry that, we merge it with the best wisdom of our spiritual past? What if we marry those two different ways of knowing into a greater wisdom? Where will that lead us? And this is what this Divine Matrix now is beginning to show, is that there is this field of energy that connects everything. It's the field of energy where our healing begins, where peace begins, where our abundance, our material and our spiritual abundance, where it begins, where the success of our careers begin, the success of our relationships. It all happens in this field of energy before it ever becomes real in our world. So that understanding, scientists now accept the fact that this field is there. So it's not a theory, it's not a metaphor, and it's not a